At a time when people are struggling,
the coronavirus pandemic has left millions of Americans out of work. And just this
crisis, there's the huge economic toll on American families.
Studying evidence of an economy that suddenly hit a brick wall.
Private debt collectors are garnishing wages. They're taking money out of people's paychecks when they can least afford it.
For them to start garnishing during a time when people are really, truly struggling, it's ridiculous.
Deena McIver was living paycheck to paycheck before the pandemic hit. Now, the Beaverton woman is in danger of not being able to make rent after a private debt collector started garnishing her wages. In July, Ray Klein Inc, or Professional Credit Service, started taking about 20% of Deena's paycheck. It was a significant hit, especially after her work hours had been cut during the pandemic.
I'm already pinching pennies to get by, and now I get to pinch them even more. I hope I like ramen noodles.
The debt is from nearly 10 years ago, when Deena got treatment at Providence Portland Medical Center. Over the past decade, she'd lost track of how much she owed, moved a couple of times, and says she never heard from Providence again. At some point, Providence, one of the country's largest and richest hospital chains, referred Deena's old medical bills to Ray Klein.
The thing is this debt is more than 10 years old.
Garnishments can happen after a debt collector or creditor files a small claim and gets a judgment against someone who owes them money. Some people aren't even aware of the court proceedings because they haven't been informed. When they don't show up, a judge can issue a default, allowing the debt collector to go ahead and take a portion of their wages.
I haven't seen a single letter from them or a phone call or even, anything, an email, anything to just say, hey, can you pay us? Can we work this thing out? I could have had it paid off years ago if I knew about it.
Phil White had long forgotten about his old medical bills from Providence, Portland. He'd since moved to Sacramento. But in June, a debt collector suddenly started garnishing his wages.
Times are already tough for me, and then they just got even tougher.
Despite various protections for people struggling to pay student loans, mortgages, or rent during the coronavirus pandemic, only a handful of states have stopped debt collectors from moving ahead with wage garnishments, and many of those protections have now been rescinded. In Oregon, there's no special help for indebted consumers during the pandemic. Instead, it's business as usual for debt collectors. A review of court records found since April, there have been more than 500 judgments in Multnomah County alone, allowing the garnishment of wages.
We're looking at a big ding out of every paycheck that I get.
The collection agency, Ray Klein, deferred to Providence for comment. In a written statement, a Providence spokesperson said, Providence's goal is to avoid sending any account to collections, and we have steps built in to provide multiple opportunities for patients to work along with us to resolve or eliminate account balances. Additionally, Providence said during the pandemic, it has asked the collection agencies it works with, including Ray Klein, to implement immediate action such as ceasing to charge interest, postponing litigation proceedings, and deferring payment plans. But despite that request, Ray Klein still filed court papers for garnishment of wages against Deena in July, right in the middle of a pandemic. She's since moved out of her apartment and moved in with her brother. The garnishment of wages can be crippling, especially for those barely getting by during a pandemic.
Okay, Kyle Aboshi joining us now. So Providence told the debt collector to postpone the legal proceedings, but obviously that did not happen. What now?
Right. And we pushed Providence on this. They said, listen, we're going to go back to these debt collection agencies we work with and make sure they clearly understand these legal proceedings should not be moving forward. Worth noting as well, Providence sent us quite a detailed outline of steps it takes to work with people who simply can't pay. Their point is, deal with this on the front end. Deal with it when it's the hospital, not when it gets to a third-party debt collector, because it's a much different situation then.
And you've done a lot of stories throughout all this, not just on medical bills, but aggressive debt collecting in a couple different forms. What have you been able to kind of figure out doing all these different stories?
Right. And in this series, The Cost of Collections, we've really focused on the city of Portland and the fact it sets people to collections as well. And what's interesting, and during the course of reporting on this particular story, I found another case where A woman is having her wages garnished. She works at Dollar Tree. Why? Because of an old water bill with the city of Portland. What was interesting to me is you've got the city of Portland here that's asking for leniency from landlords, for instance, not to evict renters. But what is it doing? It's garnishing the wages from a woman who works at Dollar Tree for an old water bill.
All right. Kyle Aboshi, we look forward to your further reporting. Appreciate it.